You know what? There's a shadow version of what we're seeing, where these identities are broken apart, and so all the identities are fighting. But there's this inverse of that of, is racism a big enough sin to contain all the other sins? And it seems like racism as a sin is too small of a box and they're trying to shove all this stuff in there. So they're like, well, there's phobia, there's this kind of phobia, that kind of phobia. Like, okay, we have all these different boxes. It seems like not only the heavens are broken, but hell is broken too, and all these different, competing. Aspirations and identities and negativities.
I agree. I think that the idea that the only value possible is inclusion. I don't think that's a way for reality to exist. It's a very strange. It's a value that has to be moderated with other values, and you can't just have that one value, especially just because, like I said, the world just doesn't work that way. The best way is to have a sense of who you are at different levels and different groups, because we're all, not just one thing, and we're all several identities. We all have different groups and identities that we identify with. The best way for me is to understand where you are, who you are, which identities are manifested in you, and then in understanding that, then be able to love those that are outside, like to love the stranger in every way that's real for you. It's not only in terms of race or in terms of nation, it's also in terms of your house and in terms of the people outside in the street. The notion that you need to love the stranger, and love doesn't just mean absolute inclusion. It doesn't mean that. Right? It's not true that I'm meant to include all the strangers into my house. It just doesn't work. It's just not going to happen. And so there needs to be moderation, compassion and judgment. There needs to be the left and the right hand. This pulling closer, keeping away. All of this stuff. This kind of breathing in and out of identities is the normal way to go.
Yeah. That evokes the image of the amount of polarization. There's these charts that show like how, like in the United States Congress, like how close people are over the decades, or how close they work together, or the connections, and it's just getting back separated. And I think that's happening on that level of a legislative level, but also in the values that we go back and forth between, like build the wall and then tear down the wall, free healthcare for everybody and no immigration reform, like these totally like these values are so extreme that they don't actually work. They don't actually work. If you just listen to what the left wants to do and if just what the right wants to do, like they need each other, and there's a brokenness between those two aspects. It seems like.
Yeah, it is interesting to notice, if you actually listen to the things that are being said, is, this is something that people have tried in me recently. They've said, look at what most of the right-leaning people are saying, and there is no one saying just us. Like, no one is saying that. There are very few people saying that, and so it's like the whole pendulum is being pulled on one side, and whatever is on the other side of where the extreme is that's an extreme. So the idea that you need to have some kind of, just the idea of a border, that you need to have a border, you need to have some kind of process to vet immigrants, all of a sudden that's racist in itself. It's like, man, that is a very reasonable proposition. Now, we're not Nazis here. We're just saying, okay, you need to make sure that people that, like, just like your house, you need to make sure the people come into your house are not going to come into, they're not the bad people. There are good people and bad people out there, but you don't know them. So you need to get to know them before you let them in, right? And so anyway, so that's difficult, because as we're being pulled in one direction, it's as if the reasonable ones that are trying to find a middle ground are getting smashed because they're being treated as if they're extreme. But I don't think that a lot of the discourse is extreme. Yeah. Like, at least when you see, I mean, I think, Benjamin, you've been kind of on that path where you've noticed that, you have Brett Weinstein, who is actually very liberal, but is somehow seen as a fascist Nazi, and that's just someone like Joe Rogan or all these characters are
Yeah.
not at all
Yeah.
like hard right at all.
Yeah.
And so I don't see an easy solution to that. 'Cause you can't say the middle. Like you can't also go into the middle. You can't say, well, I'm going to be in the middle between these two extremes. But it's like, no, I don't see the other as an extreme, so I don't know how to find the middle between the two.
Yeah.
It's ironic that we're having this conversation where everyone complicit in the current system is a white supremacist, when 3 or 4 years ago there was a survey done finding that people today were more open to having their son or daughter marry someone of a different race than they would be of the opposite political party. And so you really have to ask yourself, well, what polarities are we actually working out here? Is it really race? And as Jonathan noted, Barack Obama, when you look at, in many ways, the policies of Barack Obama as compared to George W. Bush, it was very much continuation, the immigration policy, many of these policies. And you basically are functionally labeling Barack Obama a white supremacist. And it's just insane. It's just insane.
But it's addictive.
Yeah.
Yeah.